I am 26 years old, and I thought my wedding day was going to be the happiest day of my life. I had planned everything for over a year. The flowers were perfect. The venue was a dream. The man waiting for me at the end of the aisle was the love of my life. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for one thing. One person. My cousin, Chloe. Our mothers were sisters and we had grown up together, but our relationship was not one of simple friendship. It was a quiet, lifelong competition that I had never wanted to be a part of. If I got a new doll, she needed the same one, but with more accessories. If I got an A on a test, she would talk for weeks about the A, plus she got in a different class. It was exhausting, but I learned to live with it. I kept a careful distance. I shared very little about my life that was truly important. I thought that by creating that space, I was protecting myself. I was wrong. The morning of my wedding started beautifully. My maid of honor, Sarah, was with me. My mom was fluttering around, misty-eyed and happy. I felt a sense of peace as I got my hair and makeup done. I stepped into my dress, a simple but elegant A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves. It was the dress I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. Looking in the mirror, I saw a bride. I saw a happy woman about to start her future. Then, just before I was supposed to head to the ceremony, the door to the bridal suite opened. My Aunt Julia, Chloe's mother, poked her head in. She was beaming. "You look stunning, Lily," she said. "Just wait until you see Chloe. The two of you look like princesses today." I smiled, a little confused by the comment. "Thank you, Aunt Julia. I can't wait to see everyone." She disappeared and my mom sighed. "Your aunt is so proud of her." Sarah shot me a look over my mom's shoulder. It was a small, tight look that said, "Warning." I ignored it. I did not want anything to spoil this day. I took a deep breath. It was time. My father was waiting outside to walk me down the aisle. As I stepped out of the suite, I saw her. I saw Chloe. She was standing at the far end of the hall talking to one of the groomsmen. My heart did not just sink. It stopped. It completely ceased to beat for a solid second. She was wearing a white dress. It was not off-white. It was not cream or ivory or champagne. It was stark, brilliant, bridal white. But it was worse than that. It was a floor-length gown, fitted at the top and flowing out at the bottom. It had lace sleeves. It was almost identical to my own wedding dress. I felt the air leave my lungs. My father put a hand on my arm. "Lily, are you all right? You've gone pale." I could not speak. I just stared. Chloe turned then as if she could feel my eyes on her. She saw me, and she smiled. It was not a happy, celebratory smile. It was a sharp, triumphant smile, a smile that said, "I win." She knew exactly what she was doing. This was not a mistake. This was a declaration of war, and she had chosen my wedding day as her battlefield. I felt a coldness spread through me, pushing out all the warmth and happiness I had felt just moments before. She was not just trying to share my spotlight. She was trying to steal it. And as I stood there, frozen in my own wedding dress, I knew I could not let that happen. My father's grip on my arm tightened. "Lily, honey, what is it?" I finally found my voice. It was a whisper. "Her dress?" I said. He followed my gaze and his face hardened. "Oh, for heaven's sake," he muttered. He looked back at me, his eyes full of concern. "Don't you worry about her. Today is your day. She's just making a fool of herself." But I knew it was more than that. It was a carefully calculated move. Every guest who saw her would do a double take. Every photo would be a source of confusion. Every memory of this day would be tainted by her presence, by her deliberate act of malice. Sarah came up beside me. She did not say a word. She just squeezed my hand. Her support was a small anchor in the storm that was suddenly raging inside me. I had to walk down the aisle. I had to marry Mark. I could not let her stop that. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to look away from Chloe. I looked at my dad. "I'm okay," I said, though my voice trembled. Let's go. As we started the slow walk toward the ceremony, I could feel Chloe's eyes on my back. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare. The happy music felt like a cruel joke. The smiling faces of our friends and family felt like a blur. All I could see in my mind's eye was that white dress, that triumphant smile. The ceremony itself is a fog in my memory. I remember standing across from Mark, my hands in his. I remember the look in his eyes, full of love and a little bit of worry. He could tell something was wrong. I tried to focus on his words, on the promises we were making to each other. But my mind kept drifting back to the front row, where Chloe was sitting next to her parents. She was positioned perfectly to be in every wide shot. A second bride, waiting in the wings. I said, "I do." I heard Mark say it too. We were married. The officiant announced us as husband and wife. People cheered. As Mark kissed me, I felt a flicker of the joy I was supposed to feel. But as we turned to walk back up the aisle, the first person I saw was her. She was standing, clapping, a serene smile on her face as if she were the gracious host of this event. The sight of her stole my breath again. Once we were out of the ceremony space and in a small private room, Mark wrapped his arms around me. "Lily, what's wrong? You were a million miles away up there." Tears I had been holding back started to fall. "Did you see her?" I asked. My voice choked. "See who?" he asked, stroking my hair. "Chloe," I whispered. "Did you see what she's wearing?" He pulled back, his brow furrowed. "No, I was kind of focused on you. What about her?" Before I could answer, Sarah burst into the room. Her face was flushed with anger. "I am going to kill her," she said, her voice low and furious. "I am going to rip that dress off her and burn it." Mark looked from me to Sarah, completely lost. "What is going on?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Chloe is wearing a wedding dress," she said bluntly. "A white floor-length lace-sleeved wedding dress." Mark's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief and then to pure rage. "She what?" he said. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," I said, wiping my eyes. "It looks just like mine, Mark. It's almost identical." He was speechless for a moment. He just stared at me, then at Sarah. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "She's out there mingling," Sarah said, disgust dripping from every word. "And that's not even the worst part." I looked at her. What could be worse? Sarah hesitated. She looked at me, her eyes full of pity. "Lily, maybe we should talk about this later." "No," I said, my voice firming up. The initial shock was starting to wear off, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "Tell me now. What else?" Sarah took another deep breath. "I was in the ladies' room just before the ceremony, touching up my lipstick. Chloe came in with one of her friends. She was fixing her hair in the mirror. Her friend said something like, 'Wow, Chloe, that dress is brave.' And Chloe just laughed." Sarah paused, and I braced myself. "She looked at her reflection," Sarah continued, her voice trembling with rage. "And she said, 'I know. I bet I even look better than the bride.'" The words hit me like a physical blow. It was not just an act of thoughtless narcissism. It was a direct personal attack, spoken aloud. She had not only tried to upstage me, but she had also voiced her belief that she had succeeded. The disrespect was so profound, so absolute, that it almost did not feel real. Mark's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "That's it," he said. "I'm kicking her out." He started for the door, but I grabbed his arm. "No," I said. He turned to me, his face a mask of fury. "Lily, I am not going to let her ruin our wedding day like this. She doesn't get to stay here after pulling a stunt like that." "I know," I said, my own voice surprisingly calm. "But kicking her out is what she wants. She wants a scene. She wants to be the victim. She wants everyone to talk about how the jealous bride threw her poor cousin out just for wearing a pretty dress. We can't give her that." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Lily's right. A big scene just makes it all about her. Mark looked at me, his anger warring with his reason. So what do? We just let her get away with it? We let her swan around our reception in a wedding dress, telling people she looks better than you? I looked at my best friend and then at my new husband. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound in my chest, but something else was growing alongside it. Resolve. Cold, clear, and sharp as glass. I was 26 years old. I had spent my entire life letting Chloe walk all over me, diminishing my accomplishments and copying my choices, all while I politely stood by and said nothing to keep the peace in the family. But this was different. This was my wedding. This was a line that could not be uncrossed. No, I said, my voice steady now. We don't let her get away with it, but we're not going to cause a scene. A small, cold smile touched my lips. We're going to be much smarter than that. Mark and Sarah both looked at me, waiting. The seed of a plan was already forming in my mind. It was audacious. It was cruel. And it was exactly what she deserved. She wants to be the bride, I said quietly. I think we should let her feel like it. For a little while. Anyway. The reception was being held in a grand ballroom at the same venue. As we were announced and walked in, the first thing I did was scan the crowd. And there she was. Chloe was standing near the head table, chatting with my mother. My own mother, Carol. She was smiling and nodding, one hand resting on Chloe's arm, right on the lace sleeve of that awful dress. A fresh wave of betrayal washed over me. My mother knew. She had to have seen the dress before I did. She had been in and out of the bridal suite all morning. She had seen Chloe, and she had said nothing. She had let me walk out of that room completely unprepared for the humiliation her niece had prepared for me. Mark squeezed my hand and I squeezed back, grateful for his solid presence beside me. We made our way to the head table. As we got closer, my mother turned to me, her face beaming with a strained, overly bright smile. Lily, darling, you were so beautiful up there. Wasn't she, Chloe? My mother said, turning to my cousin. Chloe's smile was pure innocence. Absolutely breathtaking, she said, her eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of something triumphant in their depths. We both clean up pretty well, don't we? I felt my own smile become tight and brittle. It's a memorable dress, Chloe, I said, my voice sweet as poison. Wherever did you find it? She gave a little laugh, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, just a little boutique. I saw it and I just had to have it. You know how it is. No, I said, my gaze unwavering. I don't. I spent a year looking for my dress. I didn't just happen to find it. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. My mother jumped in, her voice flustered. Well, you both look lovely. Now, let's get you two seated. You must be starving. She bustled around, trying to smooth over the moment. I sat down next to Mark, my appetite completely gone. I watched my mother fuss over Chloe for a moment, straightening a fold in her skirt. It was clear where her loyalties lay. She would do anything to avoid a confrontation, even if it meant sacrificing my feelings on my own wedding day. Mark leaned over to me. Are you okay? He whispered. I will be, I said, giving him a small, reassuring smile. Just stick with the plan. No big scenes. Your mother? He started, his voice laced with disapproval. I know, I said, cutting him off. I'll deal with her later. Right now, I need to focus. I needed information. I needed to understand the full scope of this betrayal. While people were eating, I excused myself from the head table, claiming I needed to greet some of our older relatives. My first stop was my Aunt Linda, my father's sister. She was a no-nonsense woman who had always been kind to me. I found her by the gift table. Aunt Linda, I said, giving her a hug. I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart, she said, holding me at arm's length. You look like a vision. That dress is perfect. Her eyes then flickered over my shoulder and her smile tightened just a fraction, though it seems to have started a trend. I took a deep breath. That's actually what I wanted to ask you about, I said, keeping my voice low. Chloe's dress. It's a bit of a surprise. Aunt Linda's expression turned sympathetic. I can imagine, she said dryly. When I first saw her, I thought she was one of your bridesmaids who had gotten the color wrong. She paused, then leaned in closer. I did say something to her mother about it. Julia just waved it off. What did Chloe say? I asked. Has she said anything to you? Aunt Linda looked uncomfortable. Well, this is awkward, Lily. But when I saw her earlier, I told her the dress was bold, and she said the strangest thing. What was it? I pressed. She told me not to worry, Aunt Linda said, lowering her voice even more. She said, oh, it's fine. Lily and I talked about it. She said she was okay with it. The lie was so audacious, so blatant, that I almost laughed. It was one thing to wear the dress. It was another thing entirely to lie to our family, claiming I had given her my blessing. She was not just trying to steal my moment. She was actively trying to reframe the narrative, painting me as a willing participant in my own humiliation. Thank you for telling me, Aunt Linda, I said, my voice tight. That's very helpful to know. I thought you should, she said, patting my arm. Don't let her get to you. Anyone with eyes can see who the real bride is. I gave her a grateful smile and moved on. The anger inside me was crystallizing. It was no longer a hot, messy emotion. It was becoming cold and sharp. This was premeditated. She had a story prepared. She had her defenses ready. My next conversation was with my mother. I found her near the cake, talking with one of her friends. I waited until the friend walked away, and then I approached her. Mom, can I talk to you for a second? I asked. Of course, sweetie, she said, her smile still painfully bright. Is everything okay? No, I said bluntly. It's not. I want to know why you didn't tell me about Chloe's dress. Her smile faltered. She glanced around nervously as if worried someone would overhear. Lily, please don't make a scene. It's your wedding day. I am not making a scene, I said, my voice low but firm. I am asking you a question. You saw her before I did. Why didn't you say anything? She sighed, her shoulders slumping. What was I supposed to do? Tell her to go home and change? That would have caused a huge fight. Your Aunt Julia would have been hysterical. So you chose to let me be humiliated instead? I asked, my voice rising slightly despite my best efforts. You chose to protect Aunt Julia's feelings over mine? On my wedding day? Don't be so dramatic, she snapped, her voice sharp. It's just a dress. Nobody is confusing her for the bride. You're overreacting. The gaslighting was so textbook, so predictable, that it felt like a slap in the face. I am not overreacting, I said. She is wearing a wedding gown to my wedding. She told Aunt Linda that I approved it. And Sarah heard her tell a friend that she looks better than me. How am I supposed to feel, Mom? Happy? My mother's face paled. She said that? Yes, I said. She did. So please stop telling me it's just a dress. And stop telling me not to be dramatic. You are my mother. You were supposed to be on my side. Tears welled up in her eyes. I am on your side, Lily. I just don't want any fighting. This family is fragile enough as it is. This isn't about fighting, I said, my patience wearing thin. This is about right and wrong. And what Chloe did is wrong, and you letting her do it and then defending her is also wrong. I turned and walked away before she could respond. I could not stand to look at her for another second. Her weakness, her desperate need to keep the peace at any cost, had made her an accomplice. I found Mark and Sarah back at the head table. They both looked at me with concern. How did it go? Mark asked. My mother is an enabler, and my cousin is a pathological liar who has been planning this for weeks, I said, sinking into my chair. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Okay, so plan A, ignoring her is officially dead. What's plan B? I looked across the room. Chloe was now on the dance floor, laughing and twirling with one of Mark's cousins. She looked radiant. She looked happy. She looked like a bride. My gaze drifted over to the corner of the room where the photographer, David, was setting up some lights for the formal portraits later. David was an artist. I had hired him because his work was not just about taking pictures. It was about telling a story. His photos had a way of capturing the truth of a moment. And that's when the plan fully formed in my mind. It was no longer a vague idea. It was a clear, precise strategy. I have a plan, I said to Mark and Sarah, and it's going to work. But I need you both to trust me, and I need you to play your parts. They both leaned in, their expressions serious. Chloe wants to be in the photos, I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. She wants a permanent record of how she tried to ruin my wedding. I think we should give it to her. We're going to give her a photograph she will never, ever forget. Sarah's eyes lit up with a fierce, loyal glee. Lily, you are my hero. What do we do? First, I said, my eyes locking on the dance floor. We let her enjoy herself. We let her think she's won. The higher she flies, the harder she's going to fall. I needed to gather more evidence of her intentions. The lie she told Aunt Linda was a good start, but I wanted something more. I needed to understand the depth of her campaign. Sarah was the perfect person for the job. While I was forced to smile and play the happy bride, she could move through the reception like a ghost, listening. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice low. I need you to do some reconnaissance, mingle, talk to people, especially people from her side of the family. See what the official story is. I want to know exactly what lies she's been spinning. Sarah grinned, a predatory glint in her eye. Consider me your spy. I'll be back with a full report. She slipped away from the table and blended into the crowd. Mark put his arm around me. Are you sure about this, Lily? We could just ask her to leave. My dad would do it, no questions asked. I shook my head. No. If we kick her out, she becomes a martyr. Her mother and my mother would spend the next 20 years talking about how I overreacted and bullied poor Chloe. She would dine out on that story forever. This has to be different. The consequences have to come from her own actions. She has to be the architect of her own downfall. He looked at me, a newfound respect in his eyes. You are terrifying when you're angry, he said with a small smile. I'm just done being nice, I replied, my gaze fixed on my cousin, who was now posing for selfies with a group of our younger relatives. She was tilting her head, pushing her dress forward, making sure it was the centerpiece of every shot. She was creating her own wedding album right in the middle of my reception. The next hour was agony. I had to do the first dance with Mark, and all I could think about was the white dress hovering at the edge of the dance floor. I had to dance with my father, who kept whispering apologies in my ear. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Your mother and I will talk to Julia tomorrow. There's nothing to talk about, Dad, I told him. This is between me and Chloe now. I cut the cake. I threw the bouquet, pointedly not in Chloe's direction, though she had positioned herself front and center. Through it all, I smiled. I laughed. I played the part of the blissful bride. But underneath, I was a coiled spring of cold fury. Every laugh from Chloe's table, every admiring glance sent her way, was another drop of fuel on the fire. Finally, Sarah returned. She slid into the seat next to me, her face grim. Okay, I've got the intel, she said quietly. And it's worse than we thought. Mark and I both leaned in. Tell us, I said. I started with her friend, the one from the bathroom. Her name is Megan, Sarah began. I pretended to be impressed by Chloe's dress. I said something like, wow, Chloe is so brave to wear white. I wish I had her confidence. Good angle, Mark murmured. It worked, Sarah said. Megan totally fell for it. She said, "Oh, Chloe's not worried." She said Lily has been so stressed and insecure about the wedding, and Chloe wanted to wear something that would make her feel supported. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Supported? She thinks wearing a rival wedding dress is supportive? It gets better, Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. According to Megan, Chloe's dress is meant to be a symbol of their sisterly bond, showing that they are two halves of the same whole. She also told Megan that you've been copying her style for years, and that your wedding dress was actually inspired by a design Chloe showed you months ago. The sheer audacity of the lie left me speechless. She was not just trying to steal my day, she was trying to rewrite our entire history. She was painting me as the insecure copycat and herself as the benevolent style icon. So she's telling people I copied her? I finally managed to say. The accusation was so ludicrous, so completely backward, that it was almost comical. That's the narrative she's pushing, Sarah confirmed. And her mother is backing her up. I overheard Aunt Julia telling someone that Chloe has a real eye for fashion, and that you've always looked up to her. She said they were both so glad you found a dress that was almost as lovely as the one Chloe had picked out. Mark let out a low whistle. This is next-level manipulation. There's more, Sarah said, her face hardening. I found the Holy Grail. I was talking to another one of our cousins, Jessica. She had her phone out, looking at Instagram. She showed me a post from Chloe from 2 months ago. Sarah pulled out her own phone and slid it across the table to me. The screen showed a picture. It was a close-up shot of a piece of fabric, a swatch of white lace. The caption read, "Secret project in the works. Can't wait to debut this masterpiece. Some people just have to be the center of attention, but true style always shines through." The lace pattern was unmistakable. It was the same intricate floral design that was on the sleeves of her dress. The same design that was on the sleeves of my dress. I had shown Chloe a photo of my dress right after I bought it, giddy with excitement. I had trusted her, and she had taken that image, that private, happy moment, and she had weaponized it. The Instagram post was her mission statement. Some people just have to be the center of attention. She was talking about me. She was calling me an attention seeker at my own wedding. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The dress was not a coincidence. The lies were not spontaneous. This was a long con, a carefully orchestrated plot to humiliate me on the one day that was supposed to be mine alone. I pushed the phone back to Sarah. The hurt I felt was now overshadowed by a profound and chilling clarity. I was not dealing with a simple narcissist. I was dealing with someone deeply malicious. "Okay," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. That's all I needed to know. I stood up. Mark and Sarah looked at me. "Where are you going?" Mark asked. I looked over at the photographer, David, who was now directing an assistant to move a large light stand. "I'm going to talk to the artist," I said. "It's time to set the stage for the final act." Finding David was not difficult. He was a whirlwind of focused energy, but he had a calm demeanor that put people at ease. That was one of the reasons I had hired him. I knew he could handle the chaos of a large family. I approached him as he was checking the settings on his camera. "David?" He looked up and smiled warmly. "Lily, there's my beautiful bride. Are you ready to take some pictures that will make your grandchildren jealous?" "I am," I said, returning his smile, though mine felt brittle. "But I have a special request for the family photos, a rather delicate one." His professional curiosity was piqued. He lowered his camera. "I'm all ears. Your wish is my command today." I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. I did not want to unload the entire dramatic saga on him just yet. I needed to gauge his reaction first. "I have a cousin," I began. "Her name is Chloe. You may have noticed her. She's wearing a very memorable white dress." A flicker of understanding crossed his face. He was a professional who had likely seen it all. "Ah," he said, his tone neutral. "I did notice. A bold choice." "Bold is one word for it," I said dryly. She has a tendency to want to be the center of attention. When it comes time for the big family portraits, the ones with everyone, I'm worried she's going to try and position herself in a way that's confusing. David nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Chloe, who was now holding court by the bar. I see, he said. You're worried about her visually competing with you in the frame. Exactly, I said, relieved that he understood immediately. You're the artist. I trust your judgment on composition. I just want to make sure that in my wedding photos, it's unequivocally clear who the bride is. He gave me a reassuring smile. Lily, you don't have to worry about a thing. The bride is always the focal point. Always. It's the first rule of wedding photography. I can use lighting, posing, and depth of field to ensure you are the star of every single shot. Your cousin's dress will be a non-issue. I'll make her fade into the background. His confidence was comforting, but it was not enough. Making her fade was not what I wanted. I wanted her erased. I wanted her publicly and professionally put in her place. Thank you, David. That's a relief, I said. But I might have a more direct idea in mind. Can we talk again in about half an hour before we start the group shots? I'd like my maid of honor, Sarah, to join us. She can help explain the situation a little better. He looked at me, his expression thoughtful. He could sense there was more to the story. Of course, he said. Find me when you're ready. We'll make sure everything is perfect. I walked back to the table feeling a small sense of victory. Phase 1 of the plan was complete. David was aware of the problem. Now it was time for Phase 2, turning him into my willing co-conspirator. Over the next 30 minutes, I watched Chloe. I studied her. She was in her element. She moved through the room with the grace and confidence of a host. She laughed with my husband's relatives, who did not know the history between us and likely just saw a beautiful girl in a beautiful dress. She even had the audacity to go over and talk to Mark's parents. I saw my father-in-law's polite smile tighten as she spoke to him. He was a man who did not suffer fools gladly, and he knew exactly what was happening. The time for the formal photos was approaching. The DJ announced that the bride and groom would be taking family portraits near the grand staircase. This was it. I found Sarah and we went to find David. We pulled him aside into a small alcove, away from the flow of traffic. David, I started, my heart beginning to pound. Thank you for speaking with us. Sarah, ever the loyal pit bull, did not waste any time. David, what Lily isn't telling you is that her cousin is a malicious, vindictive narcissist who has been planning to ruin this wedding for months. David's eyebrows shot up. I jumped in, softening the approach slightly, but not the message. She's not just wearing a white dress, David. She's wearing a near replica of my own gown. She lied to family members and claimed I approved it. We have proof that she's been telling people that I'm an insecure copycat and that she's the real star of the show. We even have an Instagram post from 2 months ago where she talks about her secret project and how true style always shines through. I showed him the post on Sarah's phone. He stared at the screen, then looked back at me. The professional neutrality was gone, replaced by a look of genuine shock and sympathy. Wow, he said softly. That's incredibly cruel. It is, I said, my voice hardening. And I am done being the victim of her cruelty. Fading her into the background isn't good enough. She tried to make a statement with her dress. I want to make a statement with my photos. He looked from me to Sarah and then back to me. What do you have in mind? He asked, his voice now low and conspiratorial. This was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. She wants to be the second bride. She wants to be seen as my equal. I want you to publicly and professionally classify her as what she is, an unnecessary duplicate. I paused, letting the words sink in. When we are all lined up for the main family photo, I want you to stop. I want you to say there's a problem with the composition. And then I want you to use one specific word to describe her. I want you to look at her, or at least in her direction, and say she is redundant. The word hung in the air between us. David's eyes widened slightly. He understood the power of that word. It was not a personal insult. It was a cold, technical, professional judgment. It meant superfluous, unnecessary, exceeding what is required. A perfect, brutal summary of her entire presence at my wedding. "That's a very strong word, Lily," he said slowly. "It's a very strong situation," Sarah countered. "I know," he said, holding up a hand. He was thinking. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was weighing the professional risk against his loyalty to his client. "David," I said, my voice soft but intense. "You are an artist. Your job is to create the best possible photograph. Her presence in that dress is a flaw in the composition. It's a distraction. It's visually redundant. I am asking you as your client to correct that flaw, in whatever way you, the professional, see fit." I was giving him an out. I was framing it as an artistic choice, not a personal attack. "And," I added, playing my final card, "I understand this is an unusual and uncomfortable request. For your discretion and for your creative problem solving, I will be adding a $2,000 bonus to your final payment." His eyes met mine. The corner of his mouth twitched into a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He was in. "As your photographer," he said, his voice returning to its smooth, professional tone, "my primary goal is to ensure the client is happy and that the final product is perfect. If there is a redundant element in the frame, it is my professional duty to remove it." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made my knees buckle washed over me. Sarah grabbed my arm, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice filled with more gratitude than I could express. "Don't thank me yet," he said, picking up his camera. "We have some photos to take. Now, let's go get everyone arranged. The light is perfect." As we walked towards the grand staircase, where my family and Mark's family were gathering, my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The trap was set. The bait, a formal family portrait, was laid out. And Chloe was walking right towards it, a smug, self-satisfied smile on her face. She had no idea that her moment in the spotlight was about to become a moment of spectacular public humiliation. The process of arranging everyone for the photo was controlled chaos, expertly managed by David and his assistant. "Okay, parents of the bride and groom, right here in the center with Mark and Lily," David called out, his voice cheerful and commanding. My mother and father stood on my side, Mark's parents on his. My mother was still avoiding my eyes. My father gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Grandparents, let's have you seated in these chairs right in front," David continued. Then came the siblings and their partners. Sarah, as my maid of honor, stood right next to me. Finally, David said, "Aunts, uncles, and cousins, please fill in on the sides and in the back. Let's make it a nice, full picture." I watched from the corner of my eye as Chloe made her move. She did not go to the side or the back. With practiced ease, she slipped through a gap and positioned herself directly behind my mother, so that she was standing almost right between me and my mom. Her white dress was a beacon, impossible to miss. From a distance, it would look like she was part of the central bridal party. It was a masterful, shameless maneuver. She looked directly at me and gave a tiny, self-satisfied smirk. She thought she had won. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I took a deep breath and focused on Mark's hand in mine. I looked at David. He caught my eye and gave me a nearly invisible nod. It was time. "Okay, everyone," David said, raising his camera. "Big smiles. This is a beautiful group. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The flash went off. He took another one for good measure. "Perfect. Just a couple more like that." He took 2 more shots. Chloe was beaming, her smile wider and more radiant than anyone's. She was cementing her place in my family history, her white dress a permanent stain on the record of my day. Then David lowered his camera. He frowned, putting a hand on his chin as if he were studying a complex painting. The smile on his face was gone, replaced by a look of serious, professional concentration. "Hold on," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Something's not right." A nervous murmur went through the group. People shifted their weight. My Aunt Julia looked concerned. "Is everything okay?" David did not answer her. He continued to stare at the group, his gaze sweeping over us. He was a performer, and this was his stage. "The composition," he said, shaking his head slightly. "It's unbalanced. The visual weight is off." He squinted as if trying to solve a difficult puzzle. "There's a visual echo." He looked up from his camera, his eyes scanning the central part of the group. His gaze passed over me, over Mark, over our parents. And then it landed. It did not land directly on Chloe's face, but on the space she occupied, on the jarring splash of white that was her dress. He paused for a long, dramatic beat. The silence was heavy. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for him to identify the problem. And then he said the word. "I'm sorry," he announced to the group at large, his voice crisp and clear. "But the second bride is redundant." The word echoed in the sudden, complete silence. Redundant. It was not an insult shouted in anger. It was a technical assessment, delivered with cold, professional finality. It was devastating. I saw the smile completely vanish from Chloe's face. Her mouth fell open slightly. Her skin, which had been glowing with triumph, turned a splotchy, horrified red. "What?" she stammered, her voice a strangled whisper that was shockingly loud in the quiet hall. "What did you call me?" David, to his immense credit, did not engage with her directly. He maintained his professional persona perfectly. He addressed the group as if she hadn't spoken. "For these formal portraits to work, I need to remove the redundant element from the composition. It's distracting from the main subject." He then gestured vaguely in Chloe's direction without actually pointing at her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm. "The lady in the white dress. Could you please step out of the frame for this next series of shots? You're creating a visual conflict with the bride." The collective gasp from the family was audible. My mother's face was a mask of horror. My Aunt Julia looked like she was about to faint. Chloe just stood there, frozen, her face contorting with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and incandescent rage. "Step out?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "You want me to step out of my family's photo?" "Just for the formal bridal party portraits," David said smoothly, as if this were the most normal request in the world. "We need a clean shot. Or," he added, as if just thinking of it, "you could stand in the very back, perhaps over on the end." He gestured to the far edge of the group, a spot usually reserved for distant cousins or plus ones nobody really knew. The demotion was absolute. He had, in a few professional sentences, publicly reclassified her from co-bride to unwanted background clutter. Chloe looked around wildly, seeking an ally. Her eyes landed on her mother, who was speechless. Then she looked at my mother, who just stared back, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Finally, her desperate gaze met mine. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just looked at her with a calm, neutral expression. An expression that said, "You did this to yourself." This was her moment of reckoning. She had wanted to be the center of attention. Now she was. Every eye was on her, not with admiration, but with a mixture of pity, confusion, and dawning comprehension. They were all finally seeing what I had seen for years. I can't believe this," she sputtered, tears welling in her eyes. She turned and shoved her way through the relatives, her beautiful, redundant dress catching on someone's chair. She let out a sob, a raw, wounded sound, and then she ran. She ran out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind her. Aunt Julia, finally snapping out of her shock, shot me a look of pure hatred before rushing after her daughter. My mother took a step toward me. "Lily, How could you? She whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, my father stepped in front of her. That's enough, Carol, he said, his voice low and firm. Lily did nothing. This has been coming for a long time. David clapped his hands together, his cheerful demeanor returning as if nothing had happened. Okay, much better. The composition is clean now. Let's try this again, shall we? Big smiles. Everyone. Let's get a happy memory for our wonderful bride and groom. And as the flash went off again, capturing our family, our real family, I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. A smile of relief, of vindication, and of a profound, satisfying peace. The redundant element had been removed. The picture was finally perfect. The rest of the photo session was tense but efficient. David, the consummate professional, moved us through the poses, his cheerful chatter filling the awkward silence left by Chloe and Aunt Julia's dramatic exit. My mother stood stiffly beside my father, her face a thunderous mask. She refused to look at me. Several other relatives shot me looks that ranged from sympathetic to disapproving, but no one dared to say a word. The power dynamic had shifted and everyone felt it. After the family photos were done, Mark pulled me aside. He wrapped his arms around me and held me tight. That was the most brutal and beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. He whispered into my hair. I leaned against him, a shaky laugh escaping my lips. Was it too much? He pulled back to look at me, his eyes shining. It was exactly what she deserved. I am so proud of you for standing up for yourself. His unwavering support was the anchor I needed. I couldn't have done it without you and Sarah, I admitted. Or David. I need to go thank him. I found David packing up a lens. David, I said, my voice full of emotion. I don't even know what to say. Thank you. He looked up and gave me a small, genuine smile. I told you my job was to make the client happy, he said, and to protect the integrity of the photograph. The composition was objectively flawed. He winked. I simply corrected it. I will be transferring that bonus first thing in the morning, I said. It's not necessary, he started to say, but I cut him off. It absolutely is, I insisted. You went above and beyond. You were my knight in shining armor, armed with a camera. He chuckled. In that case, I accept. Congratulations, Lily. Now go and enjoy the rest of your party. You've earned it. And I did. For the first time all day, I felt light. The dark cloud that had been hanging over me was gone. I danced with Mark. I laughed with our friends. I ate my wedding cake. The reception, which had started as a stage for my humiliation, had transformed into a true celebration. Chloe's absence was a palpable relief. Of course, the drama was not entirely over. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, my mother cornered me near the coat check. We need to talk, she said, her voice cold. I'm a little busy right now, Mom, I said, trying to keep my tone light. It's my wedding night. Don't you dare use that tone with me, Lily, she hissed, grabbing my arm. You deliberately and publicly humiliated your cousin. You ruined her night. You may have ruined her relationship with this entire family. I pulled my arm away, my own anger flaring up again. This time, I did not hold it back. I ruined her night? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My heart is pounding in my chest, a furious drumbeat. I feel the heat rise in my face. She showed up to my wedding in a replica of my bridal gown. She lied to everyone. She told people she looked better than me. She tried to ruin the single most important day of my life, and you are angry at me for defending myself? There were other ways to handle it, she insisted, her voice trembling. You could have spoken to her privately. You could have asked me or your father to intervene. You chose the cruelest possible option. I am done handling it, I said, my voice rising. I have been handling Chloe my entire life. I have been swallowing her insults, ignoring her jabs, and letting her get away with her petty jealousies to keep the peace, to keep you and Aunt Julia happy. Well, I'm not doing it anymore. My job is not to manage Chloe's ego, and your job is not to enable her. Tears streamed down her face. She's your family, Lily. She stopped acting like my family the moment she bought that dress. I shot back. And you stopped acting like my mother the moment you saw it and said nothing. You chose her side, Mom. You chose to protect the person causing the problem instead of the person being hurt. So you don't get to stand here on my wedding night and lecture me about cruelty. The finality in my voice must have gotten through to her. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to argue, but no words came out. She just looked lost, defeated. The choice is yours, I said, my voice softening slightly, but my resolve firm. You can continue to enable her and make excuses for her, or you can be my mother. But you can't do both anymore. From now on, my husband and I are my priority. My peace is my priority. If Chloe is a part of any family gathering, I will not be. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there by the coats. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but it was necessary. I was drawing a line, not just with Chloe, but with the entire family system that had allowed her behavior to fester for years. The weeks after the wedding were a strange mix of bliss and fallout. Mark and I went on our honeymoon and managed to forget the drama for 2 glorious weeks. We came back refreshed and united, a solid team. The family, however, was in turmoil. My father, true to his word, stood by me completely. He had a long, difficult conversation with my mother, telling her that her first loyalty should have been to her daughter. He also called his sister-in-law, Aunt Julia, and informed her that Chloe's behavior was unacceptable and that an apology was expected. No apology ever came. Instead, Aunt Julia and Chloe launched a smear campaign. They told their side of the story to anyone who would listen. The story of the jealous, cruel bride and the mean-spirited photographer who conspired to bully the beautiful, innocent cousin. Some relatives, the ones who thrived on drama, bought it, but most did not. The story of the redundant dress had become the stuff of family legend. Most people had seen Chloe's behavior for themselves and understood exactly what had happened. She had overplayed her hand, and she had lost. About a month after the wedding, I got an email from David. The subject line was, "Your gallery is ready." Mark and I sat down at the computer together, a bottle of wine between us. The main gallery was stunning. David was a true artist. He had captured the joy, the love, the laughter of the day perfectly. Looking at the photos, you would never know the turmoil that had been churning beneath the surface. There was not a single photo of Chloe in the main album. It was as if she had never been there. Then, at the bottom of the email, there was a second link. It was password protected. The link was labeled simply, "The redundant file." My heart gave a little flutter. I typed in the password David had provided. Composition. A new gallery opened. It contained about 10 photos. They were the unedited, raw shots from the moment David had uttered that fateful word. The first photo showed Chloe's beaming, triumphant smile. The second showed the smile faltering as David said something was wrong. The third showed the confusion. The fourth, the dawning horror as he said the word redundant. The fifth photo was the masterpiece. It captured the exact instant her entire world came crashing down. The shock, the humiliation, the rage. It was all there, plain as day on her face. It was an ugly expression, stripped of all her practiced beauty and poise. It was the truth of who she was in that moment. The subsequent photos showed her face crumbling, the tears starting, and the final desperate look she gave me before she ran. I stared at the screen, a slow, vindictive satisfaction spreading through me. It was not a feeling I was proud of, but it was there nonetheless. This was my proof, my trophy. Should we delete these? Mark asked quietly, his hand resting on my shoulder. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the years of quiet digs, of stolen moments, of having to shrink myself to make her feel big. I thought about the pain and humiliation she had tried to inflict on me on my wedding day. No, I said, closing the file. We're not going to share them. We're not going to show them to anyone, but we're going to keep them as a reminder. A reminder of what? He asked. I looked at him, my husband, my partner, my teammate. A reminder that I am done keeping the peace, I said. A reminder that I have a voice and I am no longer afraid to use it. My relationship with my mother has been strained, but it is slowly healing. She has started to see that my boundary was not about punishing her, but about protecting myself. She has kept her distance from her sister and her niece. It is a slow process, but there is hope. I have not spoken to Chloe or Aunt Julia since the wedding. I hear through the family grapevine that Chloe is still bitter, still painting herself as the victim. But her audience is shrinking. People are tired of the drama. Last week, Mark and I were looking through our printed wedding album. It's a beautiful leather-bound book, filled with smiling faces and happy memories. There is only one bride in the entire album. As I closed the cover, I thought about Chloe one last time. She had wanted so desperately to be a main character in the story of my wedding. She had wanted to be remembered. And in a way, she got her wish. She will forever be remembered as the girl in the redundant dress, a footnote in a story that was never about her. And her humiliation is a private memory, captured in a secret file, a perfect composition of cause and effect. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all.